Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pulse Teachings, and I'm going to chat with you about Venus today. So this was actually a request from someone in the comments on one of the videos that I put up last weekend, and I thought, yes, that's a great idea. Why don't we talk about Venus and the month of August? And the more I sat with this, the more I liked this idea, because there's a lot out there on August right now, and fair enough, August has got some wild card energy. It has got some intense energy, especially around mid-August, and that is also having to do with our Aquarius full moon, and I will have another video on that. And yet, during August, there is this beautiful cosmic symphony that is happening with Venus, and she is part of how we're moving through this month. And I think focusing on Venus and kind of bringing the lens really into the Venus story of August is important, because it reminds us that whatever's going on in the collective with Saturn, with Jupiter, is also deeply, deeply personal for us. And this is because Venus is very personal. And Venus gets talked about a lot of ways in astrology, and she means a lot in astrology, and she is relationships, and she is part of where the divine feminine is going to manifest, however that manifests in our life, in our relationships. She is love. However, first and foremost, Venus has to do with our values. She has to do with the journey of our values. And the Venus journey of values is not always easy. Usually there are certain points in our life when we really have to do some looking at how we might have started structuring a life around values that we were taught, whether they come from family, culture, society. Usually it's an intersection of all of the above, and the way that we identified and were conditioned by all those parts. And then, there's these certain points in our lives when we have some things sometimes fall apart, whether that's a relationship or work or how we're making money. And a lot of times, if Venus is involved, or if it's a second house transit, or if it has to do with Taurus or other places where Venus comes up, and also Libra, it can be our values coming through, and it can be a transformation of our values, because Venus at our core is our values. How are these things really important to me? And how are they how I want to build my life? How are they how I want to embrace the divine feminine through my own relationship with myself, so that then invites certain types of people into my relational world? And again, how do I want to have relationships that manifest my values? And so at her core, Venus is really about our values. And so our values are journeying with us this month, and there's a Venus story, and it starts out just as I'm posting this. Venus is square Uranus, and so this is kind of in terms of the August story of Venus. This is the beginning, is that we begin with Venus square Uranus. Uranus is there in Taurus, so that right there is very important, because Venus is a ruler of Taurus, and Venus is in Leo at this point, and she's moving towards the end of Leo, and she squares Uranus. And when Venus is square Uranus, this begins the month with radical wake-up energy around our values. And Uranus has been in Taurus, and it's going to go retrograde next month, and it's going to be in its kind of churning up the ground around our own values, as they have to do with our authenticity, and especially around Taurus themes, which are always about also how we're rooted in ourselves and in sustainable lives, both in terms of our ecosystems and the environment, and our values in the core of our heart space, because that's where Leo is. That's what Leo is, and that's where Venus is right now. And so Venus is really speaking to Uranus, and this is radical awakening energy. And so there again, right? If folks only talk about Venus in terms of relationship, or we only look at Venus and Uranus in terms of relationship, the piece that we want to look at is how whatever's happening in relationship ultimately has to do with our values. If we're meeting someone new and it's very exciting, how is that person representing, especially if Uranus is involved, how is that representing actually our own values that we're then being able to mirror or see in another person? If we talk about Venus and we just go straight into relationship, we're bypassing the part that is our own personal Venus journey, which is our values. And then we're kind of disempowering ourselves and we're putting things onto other people when really Venus wants us to start at home within ourselves. And so the Uranus square Venus is, what are my values? How are my values changing right now? And this is where astrology is really important, and it brings us into the present moment, because it says maybe my values are going through something right now, and it's different than it was 6 months ago. It's different than it was a year ago when Venus was in a mighty Leo journey. And what's going on for you right now, you could take some time as we're moving through this weekend. What's wanting to wake up? What's wanting to be radical in terms of your own embodied life? That's Taurus. In terms of your own rootedness and your creative heart song, because Venus in Leo is your creative heart song. What does it want to sing? What does it want to express? Take some time and be with that, because that's the opening to this mighty Venus journey that we move through this whole month. And then she moves pretty closely, pretty directly from being in that square to Uranus, is still moving through this kind of the first 10 days of August. And she comes into an inconjunct with Neptune, who's at the final degree and is retrograde of Pisces, and an inconjunct with Pluto, who's at the beginning of, and is also retrograde, of Aquarius. And so she's also in what we would call a yod, where she's in an inconjunct. She's talking to two outer planets, Neptune and Pluto, but note that she was already talking to another outer planet. So Venus right away is in this kind of big conversation, and in the inconjunct there's something that's kind of being a push and pull. There's a tension point. You know, we have this radical wake up, and then we move into an inconjunct with Neptune, but Neptune at the final degree of Pisces. This is deep spiritualizing energy. As we wake up, what wants to sing that heart song in like the most culminating spiritual way that it can? And how have we potentially, some of our values, how have they been structured around there's a false self? Because that's where Leo goes. When Leo goes into shadow, when Leo goes into fear, when it's acting out of fear, Leo performs, and Leo can perform. And so when Leo is performing in a way that is fear driven, it's usually projecting a self that it knows will get validation, and it creates a bit of a vicious loop cycle because it's getting distance from its own desires and needs, and with Venus, values. And now it's like something awakens so that we can recognize how maybe we haven't had values that were really aligned with our authentic self, and here our authentic spiritual self. And so Neptune wants that kind of cosmic spirituality to just come through, and it could come through in tension. The inconjunct can work in tension, but it wants to be a growth spurt. And then Venus moves into Virgo, and Venus moves into Virgo on the 4th, 5th, it depends where we are, after our new moon. Okay, so then she moves into the earth sign, and that's when she comes into her exact inconjunct with Pluto, the great transformer. And that's also the death and rebirth cycle. Okay, so how are our values going through this journey of kind of awakening and becoming aware, and then, okay, maybe I need to release something so that I can come in more to a spiritual path. And as I do that, I transform. As I do that, I come into some, you know, ultimate release of how I was, so that I can come into a new embodiment of my values, because Venus is moving into Virgo, and Virgo is all about our embodiment. It is the mind-body connection. It is living a somewhat devotional life to the mind-body connection so that we can be of service to ourselves first and foremost, especially with Venus and Virgo, and then so that we can be of service to others. Because when Virgo forgets to be of service to itself and goes straight to others, it can get all out of whack. It can spur a lot of anxiety, and it can fall into martyring. And Venus in Virgo does not need to martyr herself. She is here, and so we come into this in conjunct with Pluto. You know, maybe how have I not been taking care of myself? Maybe once I realize what I need for my heart song to sing, now Venus moves into Virgo so that I can start enacting some of those mind-body practices that are going to help me have the energy, have the connections that I need into my body, into my grounding self, so that I can begin moving forward with some of those new heart space values that Venus has found in Leo through that journey. And then she's going to keep moving. She's going to be conjunct our Mercury retrograde, and that's going to be on August 7th. So they're going to still be in the beginning degrees of Virgo, and Venus is moving forward, Mercury is moving backwards because it's going to head into Leo. And so here is a beautiful opportunity around the 7th of August. We're only at the 7th of August. I've been talking for 10 minutes and we're at the 7th of August for some reflection. You know, it's a wonderful time to kind of reflect on what the heck has happened in this first week of August. How has the new moon set something up? And now this kind of, you know, Mercury retrograde is all about reflection. It's all about opening to different paths. And so wherever you're at in your Mercury retrograde, here's this Venus story that's coming to literally conjunct it, so that there could be maybe, well, here's a path that I hadn't considered. And I couldn't consider this path yet because it had to come with my Venus having gone through this journey, having been, or kind of radically in a short amount of time, it spoke with Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and you know, now it's in Virgo, which is the sign that has the ability and the patience to reflect, to discern. Virgo is a sign of discernment, and wanting to kind of take some time and discern, where am I on my path right now? How do I want to move forward as I move through August and come into mid-August, which is when things get a little wild. And before that, though, on August 10th, the Venus story continues in a really lovely way, because then she's going to trine Ceres. And Ceres has been journeying with us. She is the Earth Mother. She's in Capricorn. She is going to trine Venus there. And that is just a beautiful check-in, you know, as we've been on this journey, we've come out of this reflection to what really grounds me in my life, what grounds me into my elder wisdom that flows through my bones and wants to help me move towards the goal in a supporting way that is also of service to myself and of service to my dreams and what I want to do and to my relationships. Again, because it's about those values. And then we enter into mid-August, and this is when Venus, so we're going to look at mid-August from the perspective of Venus right now, because what's happening in mid-August is that Mars conjuncts Jupiter, they're in Gemini, and they square Saturn, who's retrograde in Pisces, and they square Venus, who's in Virgo. And so Venus is going to come up and she's going to be opposite Saturn. And so this is going to be exact on the 18th of August. We're going to be building for the mid-August before then. It's also building for our Aquarius full moon on the 19th. And so there's a lot of energy. And so as you're moving through mid-August, Venus is always here. And so she's in this square to Mars and Jupiter. She's opposite Saturn. And so there's something, whatever is coming up for you, there could be a lot of ideas. There could be a lot of ideas that are realizing, okay, there's some external limits, or I've been down that path, I need a new path. Opportunities that maybe then we get really excited and we say, okay, you know what, I'm not sure if that's the right path. And when we're not sure, or when those external limits are showing up, or when we're being shown that we actually need to release something rather than taking something on, we want to check in with our values. We want to check in with the journey of our values in Venus, because she is this deeply personal layer, and she's opposite Saturn. And so when she's opposite Saturn in mid-August. Saturn is releasing. Saturn is moving through Pisces, and it is releasing what we don't need to carry. It is releasing weight and baggage that we don't need, because we're heading into a new reality with Saturn and Pisces, and that has to do with Neptune in 2025 and 2026. But this is part of the work of releasing. And so there, as Saturn is opposite Venus, as we're also thinking about beginning new journeys and new chapters with our life, which is part of what the Leo new moon is also about, and is also part of what Mars conjuncting Jupiter is about. It's really important to be mindful of our values, mindful of what we actually don't need, mindful of what maybe a younger version of ourselves thought he or they needed, but we don't need it now. Maybe we have different values than we did. And here it's really important, especially as they align to our spiritual path, especially as they align to the work that you've been doing with Saturn and Pisces. Check in, as we come into the full moon, as we move through this major energy of August, regardless of what's going on in the collective, especially in terms of the media. With the Gemini energy there, with this, there's a lot of media stories, and some of it could be wonderful, some of it could not be wonderful, but this is bringing it into the personal energy of Venus, and really just being aware of how have my values shifted, how are they shifting, and as I imagine a path forward, what can I let go of? These are some of the questions that we can ask in mid-August. But it doesn't end there. And so then what's actually really also lovely as we move through that Aquarius full moon, as we come out of the exact opposition, but still talking to Saturn and to Jupiter, is that true black moon Lilith is going to conjunct Venus. And this is on the 19th and 20th. So true black moon Lilith is a point that oscillates a lot, and she's moving from Virgo and Libra right now. And so if we work with true black moon Lilith, which I do in my practice, in my evolutionary astrology practice, there's also this conjunction of true black moon Lilith and Venus there in Virgo, which is really wanting to align our values to the direction we're heading in terms of reclaiming, in terms of this is new, especially as we've talked with Saturn and we've kind of recognized a release so that new adventures can come. Then black moon Lilith comes in and it says, and this is going to be different than before. This is going to be a new embodiment for my own well-being and the work I'm doing on my path. Because black moon Lilith, she's been down the line, and she did not martyr herself. She knows what needs to be in alignment so that a reclaiming can happen in a way that's aligned with what our soul wants, needs, and deserves in a really beautiful, not deserves because it's special or this, deserves simply because it's human, simply because it knows its self-worth. That's black moon Lilith in Virgo. Okay. And then we keep going. And then on August 23rd, that Venus comes into an inconjunct with Chiron. So then there's some more healing that wants to happen. Especially that's lovely that it happens after this black moon Lilith, and then it comes into our self-worth, and then it comes into how have I maybe not thought that I deserved this, or whatever it is that's unfolding in our life, or that Venus song is kind of pulling us into. That in conjunct with Chiron wants to show us where there's a tender spot, there's something that's in the process of healing, and we can look at it and we can say, yes, this can heal. This can heal now because I am ready to claim my own sense of a sacred self in a way that's aligned with my values. My values no longer have to be silenced so that I can show up as I was taught to show up. Chiron in Aries is bringing in the sacred self. This is about our own desires and needs and authentic primal fires, and they want to call forth this kind of reclaimed Venus energy that we're journeying with. And then we move towards the end of the month, and now Venus talks to Uranus again. and then also Neptune and also Pluto. So it's like this beautiful bookend for Venus in this month, because the beginning starts with these conversations with the outer planets, and then we move to the end of the month and it ends with conversations to the outer planets. And so on the 25th, towards the end of the month, it's going to Venus is going to be trine Uranus, because she's going to be in Virgo now in an earth sign, trining that Uranus. And then she's going to move forward. She's going to be opposite Neptune. And then, sorry, I'm just looking at my dates, because I always like to look at my dates when I'm giving you dates. And then on the 29th of August, she's going to enter Libra. And then she's going to trine Pluto and Sedna. We're going to have a grand trine with Pluto and Sedna and Venus for the end of August. So note here, right, that we have this trine with Uranus, which we began with a square. And so we go through this whole Venus journey of this awakening and this kind of tension points and releasing, and then potentially a simultaneous release and expansion in mid-August to come into that kind of healing awareness, potentially a little bit of healing grace as well. And so then we trine Uranus, and then there's this supportive awareness of that awakening and how we're moving forward. And then we come and we literally end the month with Venus opposite Neptune, helping us to recognize the ways that we're being called on a spiritual path through our values. And again, this is going to be 29 degrees of Virgo now. This is ultimate mind-body connection. What in our life we're ready to commit to. Virgo is also about commitments. What are we ready to commit to for that spiritual path? And then we move into Libra. Venus moves into Libra. She trines Pluto and Sedna, two archetypal wounds of transformation, supportive energy in air signs, ready to carry us through into new understandings of how our values are ready to take us forward in pretty transformative ways, okay? Which we will hold with us, because at this point, Pluto is moving back into Capricorn, because we be in September, okay? And that's when Pluto's back in Capricorn, and then we begin that journey. And that's a whole other journey. That's a whole other video. But it's important, I think, to really focus in, especially if a lot ends up coming up this month or a lot is going on, bringing it back to your values, to your journey with your values, and also really noting the shift, because Venus in Virgo is very different than Venus in Leo, and she moves into Virgo pretty quickly after that new moon, which is also when Mercury goes retrograde, okay? So knowing that this is a month of reflection, this is a month of coming into deeper understandings, and part of what that is about our values and the way that we've been journeying, and it's just a lovely time to check in with our values, and who are you now, and what are your values now, and going through this work, it can call in new types of people to our lives. It can call in new income making to our lives. It can call in new relationships to our lives. That's the power of Venus. And especially when we don't bypass Venus in terms of our embodied values and just put it on other people, or put it on money, or put it on other things that Venus gets associated with, and allow it to really come from the embodied plane, which is where we're aware of our values, and we've done the work, and we've brought self-love into ourselves so that we can honor our values and release the ones that, for whatever reason, we adapted into our life. Sometimes that's a really strong survival mechanism. Sometimes we confuse adopting family values with love, and that's a whole journey. And understanding that we can be loved and honor our values. We damn straight can be loved and honor our values, and we don't have to conform our lives to the values of others. And that's the Venus journey, and what a journey we're getting this month. So I am sending deep Venus blessings to you, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.